Alright everybody, welcome back to Ask a Dev. Today we are going to be building and going through our workflow for 2.5D characters. What does 2.5D characters mean? What we're doing is we're creating a workflow that actually facilitates both a sprite based as well as a three-dimensional workflow. So I've been using this in some of my more recent prototyping stuff, and I thought it would be cool to share with you all, see what you all think, see if you all had any ideas or better ways of doing things. So we're going to be building some art today, which will be fun. My name is Kevin. Good morning, Panda. Good morning, IT Angel. Welcome to the stream. I currently work as a senior principal tech artist at Riot Games. Get to do a lot of really cool stuff at work, but there's a lot of really cool stuff out there I don't get to do, and so this is a fun way to share some of my little adventures and things and systems, and hopefully help you all level up, I guess, in general, different things about Unreal. So we're working with Unreal blueprints and everything like that, generally speaking, but mostly today we're going to be doing a bunch of art. So with that, hopefully we have the mic turned on today. Looks like we're good to go. Let's go ahead and actually, let's hop in and show you what we're building first. So we're building a bat character. So this is the character we're going to be building. And I want to show you start to finish how we get here. Now, there's a couple of things about this that are worth talking about before we get too into it. So why am I building 2.5D characters? In the process of prototyping and proving out gameplay and all the theses for what it is I'm trying to do, I don't want to get too lost in the art. So rather than having going full tilt on the art, building out all of the characters and losing a lot of time there, or spending a lot of time when the gameplay is not proven out yet, I am using the concept art as a means to quickly stand up characters that allow me to build all the systems I'm going to need for the platformer I'm building, for example, in this case. Now, one of the reasons that I want to do it that way is, as I mentioned, I don't want to get too far down the path of building characters when we're still working on building out the gameplay stuff. Now, the other thing we're going to do this with characters, we're going to do this with effects, but why build characters at all? Why not just use boxes or spheres? Well, boxes or spheres would work depending on your game. However, there are certain things that I know I do need to build. I need to figure out, for example, I need to prove out whether or not a sprite-based workflow or a 3D workflow is going to be best in the end for this game. In order to do that, I need assets to do that. So that's why we're building this. That's why we're going through this workflow. So as I mentioned, I'm starting with the concept art, and that's where we're going to start today. So here we are. This is our concept. And what we need to do, the overall path is, what we need to do is let's talk about just overview. We need to take our concept art, we need to cut it up in a way that allows us to animate it. We need a way to convert it to both 2D and 3D, and then we need to animate it in a way that also works from a registered two-dimensional sprite standpoint, and then we have to set it up in the engine. So that's the arc we're going through. We're going to start with our concept art, and we're going to cut it up in a way that allows us to do all those things without spending too much time. So let's see if we can get through this in an hour, because we do have to get our day started outside of this. So generally speaking, what I'll do is I take the concept art and I will begin by figuring out what needs to animate on this character. So I know in this particular case, the wings need to animate. It'd be nice to have the legs and the head. So in general, what I'll do is I'll start by cutting out the head. And I'm going to be a little bit rough about this because the whole point is for you all to understand the general workflow. Okay, so let's cut that out, paste that back in there. So now I have a layer. This is my head. Okay, and if I hide that, you'll see I have a gaping hole in my character. This is where I'm a super huge fan of a lot of our new generative fill stuff. If I just take this, because remember, keep in mind, we're just doing this as a temporary solution. if I just go ahead and grab all that generative fill and I just generate what's missing, usually I'll get a lot of really good suggestions from this. And the reason I do this is because I want the character to have something to, basically something that will, if I turn the head or move the head, it won't be a gaping hole in the character. So none of those actually were very good. So we'll try one more, and if not, we'll just do a little bit of painting. This one's not too bad. Oh, interesting. Let's try this. So let's do that. We'll call that good enough. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to collapse that layer, and then I'm going to cut this out like so. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll do one more generative fill on top of that, just to get a rounded headpiece, almost like a marionette character. So let's try one more generative fill on this section. Should have put a little bit of overlap on that, but that's okay. You'll get the general idea. And then as soon as this is done, we'll do the same thing for the legs. Yeah, I don't like any of those, so we're just going to delete that layer and call it done. Get a paintbrush, shrink it up, maybe just put something in here so we don't have it. Now you can spend a lot more time doing this, fixing this up, etc. Use the stamp tool. You get the idea. We're cutting out our head, now let's cut out a leg. Depending on the size of the cutout, you know, you can paint your own stuff, or you can use generative fill to help you out. In this case, we'll do the same thing. Just grab this hole, fill this in, so that I have a solid background. We're breaking our character up into cards, and we're going to use those cards to animate with. So I don't really need that. That's fine. I can just use this and then cut this off as an example. Okay. So if I just take an eraser tool and erase that out, that'll be all right. We can call that good enough. And then we have our leg. So we have our leg, and generally I'll put this on top of our, wait a second, where's my leg? Here we go, here's our leg. So I'm going to name this left leg, just so that I keep track of it. And I'm not going to repeat that for the left and the right sides. I'm just going to, basically what I would do is I would just grab this whole thing and mirror it over to the other side. So we have our leg, we have our fills that fill in the background of our character. So this is going to be our body, and then we have our head, which goes on top of this. And the whole point of the head is just so that the whole point of we did that is if we animate our head off, as I mentioned, whether we turn it, rotate it, move it, etc., we end up getting we don't end up getting a gaping hole in our character. So we've cut this character up now, and we're gonna work this a little bit just for time. We're gonna work this a little bit like some of those old cooking shows, and we're going to say, poof, pulled it out of the oven, and here is our cut up character. So we have our right leg, we have our left leg, we have our body, and we have our head. If I just show the head, you can see I spent a little bit more time painting this, so it had more of a breastplate to it. It was a little bit better. Our legs are, I actually lengthened the legs a little bit because I wanted them to be able to bend. This is actually a really cool tool if you've never used it. Let's just take the left leg as an example. A lot of times you can use the what the heck's it called? The liquefy, but even more fun than liquefy is puppet warp. Okay, so if I puppet warp this guy, what I'll do is I'll just put a couple of pins in here, and then I can take Did that just crash? Okay, that's fine. It did not crash. So then I can just take this and kind of bend it and reshape it. So that's how Puppet Warp works. It kind of creates it turns your 2D image almost into a mesh and allows you to move it and use pins to move it around. So that's cool. That's kind of how I made the legs. Wings was just a bunch of painting. You can see here, I fixed up kind of the edge of the wings just to make it so that they made sense. This didn't really make sense. Just a couple tweaks and stuff, but mostly just painting. The eyeball was actually, it's literally, I did two different eyeballs. I did a small one and a big one. I was playing with the idea, but generally speaking, the eyeball is made up of a couple different layers, and it's effectively just a gradient with the painting of the iris on top of it and a drop shadow. So this is what the eyeball looks like painted. It's nothing beautiful. Okay, it's basically just purple with a slit, and then you can see I have kind of like these gray kind of marks on there, but what makes the eyeball work is the highlight. This is just a color dodge layer that you can set the opacity to, and you know, just filling in some of the eye socket stuff and everything. All right, good morning, IT Angel. Welcome to the stream. All right, so we've taken our concept art, we've split it up, we've cut it up, so now that we can animate it using a kind of a card technique. There's a couple steps we are going to do here in order to kind of begin the 2.5D process. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate all of these. Sure. Okay, and each of these I'm going to call the mask layer. So let's go ahead and rename these all to be the mask. And the reason I'm doing this is because the next tool that we're using does not like the colored images. So this is gonna be the mask, body mask, right leg, left leg. This is the right leg mask, the left leg mask, the body mask. We need the head. So I'm going to create one more layer. And then I'm just going to take this and collapse this into that layer. So the head's all one piece now, okay? And then I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to call that the head mask. Mask. Okay, so what we need to do, we have our heads. I'm gonna turn off our legs, our bodies, etc. Here's all our masks. Now I'm going to use the Photoshop mode where you can only paint on the layer you're using. I'm going to create a giant paintbrush that's black, and we're basically just going to paint a real quick mask for each of these things. So starting with the head, for example, turn on our preserve and we just get a big black splotch for the head when I paint it. Same thing for our legs and stuff. What layer is this? I'm not sure what that layer is. We'll just do our left leg, or that's our right leg. Then we'll do our left leg, and then finally we'll do our body. And you can see we have that turned on by the little lock that's over here. So we'll just paint this up. So what we have is we have a proper kind of silhouette of our character, and then we're going to export all of this. So if we pick our layers and we right click them, we can just export them all at once, and we can do export as or quick export as PNG. And this is going to dump these all out to disk, and we're going to use all of our settings. So we just go ahead and take these, go ahead and click export, and that is going to dump these out to disk. Let me see if I can find them. This is our texture. Here's our exports. And you can see here we have all of our masks exported. Now, you'll notice I have a couple different ones here. I found that the best ones that worked were black on white for the mask portion. So then we go back and then we just export each of our color layers. These are going to become our textures for the actual character rigging that we're going to be doing, as well as animation. So we take all these, same thing, we just export these as a PNG again, or as a, yeah, generally I'm using PNG. Dump those in our export folder. So now we have our colored images as well. If I pop this open, my machine is going very slow, I'm looking for, you'll see I basically just have the body as a separate piece and then each of the masks in it. Okay, so very quickly, we've just, at this point, we've split up our concept art. We've split it up into animatable cards. So let's go to step 2 of this process. And I'm going to kill Photoshop. I'm not gonna save anything because we want to fix our performance. Okay, so let's take a new scene and let's show you what's next. All right, we need to take our concept cards art and I'm going to pull this into Maya. Right now I'm using Maya. You could probably use, I'm not sure how to do this in Blender, but I've seen people do stuff with ZBrush or whatever. The tool doesn't matter. The point is, what we want to do is we want to use our silhouette, our mask textures, to generate a cutout, a 3D cutout of our character. So the way that works in Maya is if we create, and there's a couple pieces to this that are important. If we create a plane, I'm having a hard time, my brain's not working yet. Here we go, polygon parameters, plane. Okay, I'm going to pump up the resolution of this plane to, let's go 50, sure, why not? And then what we're going to do is we're going to use a modify tool. Modify, convert, and the conversion that we want to use is texture to geometry. I'm going to pull up our options here, and let's start with the body mask. You can see I already have it selected here. And what's going to happen is, and this is why I took the time to make the mask. Depending on your settings, if you use colors and stuff, it can't find the differences as well. So by using the mask, I'm going to help this tool convert our texture to a 3D object. So let's just go ahead and apply that. Failed to convert texture. Too many selections. Okay, fine. Let's delete our history. And let's do that again. Okay, so I didn't actually want to delete our history. I'm going to redo that. But you can see that it took our texture and it basically projected it onto this plane. Okay, but let's back up a little bit. I'm going to back up to when we deleted our history, and I'm just going to single click the plane and do it again. And there's a reason for this. So, all right, so we've projected our wings onto the plane. Now here's the problem. You'll notice it's scrunched. So all of this, everything I'm doing here, it's important to make sure we register it to get the aspect ratio correct. Otherwise, pieces won't fit together. So if we go to our export folder and we look at the resolution of this object, it's 1936 by 797. So what I'm going to do in Maya is I'm going to set my polyplane dimensions, width and height, to 1.936 and 0.737 so that the aspect ratio is correct for this projection. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use our material, our hypershade, to help us select objects with the material, and that's going to pick all of the faces for our batwing. Just that. Okay, let's invert that and delete. Okay, now we have just the batwing. It kind of looks like a batwing. Let's delete everything by type, history. We can move this out of the way. And my goal is to get so that we can select just the batwing separate from the plane. So here we go. This is our body mask. If I just pick that and unparent it, I can now delete the original plane And what I'm left with is I'm left with a 3D, 2D card, which is why I was saying this is a 2.5D process, okay? So this is our body. So we'll just call this body, Geo. And then we'll go ahead and do the exact same thing for the head. So we'll do, how are we doing on time? 750? Okay. So exact same thing for the head. I'm going to create a polygon primitives. I'm going to do a plane. Sure, let's do 50. Actually, we don't need 50, but let's try 30. Let's see how 30 goes. Okay. And this time when we do our texture to geometry, let's take the head mask, which is this one. And it's 213 by 477. Let me write that down. Do I have a pen? I do. So it's 213 by 477. We need that to be able to remember the aspect ratio. So let's open that up. Let's apply that. So now we have our head. You can see, as I mentioned, it's completely the wrong aspect ratio. So if we pick this and we switch to the plane, I can change our width and height to be 0.213 and 0.477. So that is going to auto size our head to be proper for aspect ratio, etc. I'm going to go ahead and take this and same thing. I'm going to pick the head mask. Nope, undo. I want to select objects with material. Let's invert that and delete. Bring up our outliner, take our head mask and unparent it and delete, undo. Let's delete our history. Okay. Unparent, oops. Unparent that and delete it. Okay, and generally speaking, I messed up the order. Big time. Really big time. Holy smokes, it's totally hosed. So we'll have to rebuild that one again. Let's do it. We'll be fast. We have to get the order right. Otherwise, as you can see, this doesn't work. Pick one, apply. Let's redo our aspect ratios. We said this was 0.213, 0.477. Delete the history. Select the objects. Invert it. Delete it. And then let's unparent it. And now we can delete that. Okay, so what we're left with is we're left with our head and our body. I'm just going to move the head in place. That's cool. And then we would do the exact same thing for the legs. I think you get the idea here. What we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a quick thing with the textures, because this is kind of like the next part. So we have our black materials. The cool thing is it's pretty easy for us to fix this. Let's bring up our editor. We'll delete everything that's not used. I'm going to change this body mask, and you could simply just choose a file for a color for the body. In this particular case, if I choose the body color, you'll notice that that fills in nicely. Okay, same thing for the head, but this is not our ultimate solution, and I'm going to explain why. I just want you to see this working. So we're going to get our head, which is here. Very cool. Now, because we are in 3D, I do want to move this card in front of the other one. So we've got that. And also I'm going to make a couple changes. I'm just going to rotate everything into a vertical setup, because that's just the way I'm used to working. So let's just rotate this stuff by 90 and move it into place. Where's our origin? If we group this and we xform-zdp to 0 the pivot and show our grid so I can see, okay, we're way below the grid. All right, so let's go here. We'll move all this stuff up and in place. And this character is tiny right now, but that's okay. We'll address that in a second. All right, so you get the general idea. That's how we're creating our cards in 3D. Basically what we're using is we're projecting that mask to create the cutout. Then we're taking the cutout and we're applying our material to it. So what was I talking about with materials? There's a couple things about this as we're moving to the 2.5D. If I render this right now, you'll see it's black. There's nothing there. Well, I found personally that the best way to get the colors that I wanted was actually to use the Arnold render in Maya. But the general idea here is if you bring this up, what you can do is in your body textures, let's take the body as an example. We'll map this out. When we look at, I'm using Unreal mouse movements, which is messing everything up. So you could connect the out color into the incandescence. It's going to make this whole thing pop and look bright in the viewport, but that's okay. Now if we render a Maya software render, you get this character. Now, that to me looks kind of bad. It doesn't look like the concept, it's not on style or anything like that. So what I found actually is I do better if I create a standard Arnold surface shader. Let's see here. Arnold. Shader surface and standard surface. Okay, so let's map this one out. And what we're going to do with this one, same thing. We're going to use the exact same material, but it's going to look way better. So let's take a look at our color. We're going to use the file. And for the file, we're going to use the exact same file, which was the body. Okay, and then we're going to take that out color and we're going to fill it into, where's our emission? There's our emission color down here. Okay, so now if we take this and we assign this material to our object, it darkens in our viewport. And also if we change our renderer, right now we're still Maya software, let's change our renderer to Arnold and do a quick render. I guess I missed something in my emission. Where's our emissive? Standard surface shader, specular base transmission, emission, weight. We do need some weight on it. We need some 1. Good morning, May 7 Ari. Welcome to the stream. Okay, so we now have added our emission. Let's redo that render. You'll notice how much cleaner this looks. See if I can make it bigger so you can see it. You'll notice how much cleaner this looks when you look at this. It's a much tighter render. I don't have to do as much messing around with the textures and colors and things like that. So, okay, so we've taken our concept, we've taken our 2D image, we've converted it into a 2D 3-dimensional plane. Now we've assigned our textures and we've made it so that we can render a 2D image with it. We're like halfway to our 2.5D character workflow. Okay, so what's next? Well, just like we did before, we're going to do this cooking style. You get the general idea. That is the exact process we use. We create the plane, we mask it, we project it out. You could even extrude these now if you wanted to give them depth. If I wanted to, I could take this whole thing and I can take the edit mesh and I could extrude it. You'd have to clean up the edges because there's a lot of There's a lot of polygons in here that don't have what you need, but overall you could extrude it and then it would have depth as well. Let's see, we have a couple questions in here. I'm glad, Lucian. Is Maya what you use at work too? I used to play around with an old version of Maya and did some cool looking water image shots that look almost realistic. And you learn this, but for Blender or cheaper similar software. So yes, I do use Maya at work. It's not the only thing. I've worked in Maya, 3D Studio, ZBrush, all of those. Lately I have been looking at maybe possibly switching over to Blender for the same reasons, cost reasons, etc. But for where I am right now, plus literally I have probably 20 plus years using Maya, it's a lot faster for me just to do a bunch of this stuff in Maya just because I'm used to using it. So, but I do need to pick up Blender. So we have our materials, we have our surface and stuff, just like our cooking show. Let's go ahead and open up our completed model file. So in our Maya folder, under scenes, here is our model. Okay. So this is a completed model file, and it's exactly as I said. It's just a bunch of 2D cards that have our textures projected on them. And if we render this, because we're using the Arnold shaders, we get a nice pretty picture. And the great thing about it, it has our alpha and all kinds of stuff. And I'll show you some cool stuff with this in a minute. Okay, now what's next? Next, we got to rig this thing. We're like, wait, hold up, wait a second. Yep, we're gonna rig a 2D card. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to bring up a tool, my rigging tool personally, but how you do this does not matter. The overall point here is we're going to place joints in this character and we're going to skin it just like you would a normal 3-dimensional character, even though it's only 2-dimensional. So let's do this. Let's add a wing to this scene. So this is going to be a wing. We got left and right side, and let's say we need 1, 2, 3. Let's go 3. No, let's go 4. So we'll create this. And all this tool does, don't get lost with this tool. All this tool does is it creates joints that I can place in the scene and use to lay out my character. So that's all I'm doing here. Okay. Sure, we'll add a point here and we'll have a final one up here. All right, so that's going to be this left wing. I'm going to add in a spine, for example. We'll do a center and we'll make it, how many joints was that? Oh wait, there's an extra joint there. Oh no, that's the up vector. We need, similarly, let's do 3 for the spine. And this guy is going to go here. It's 180 degrees. We'll move this in place for the character's spine. A couple joints. Parent everything together. And then we're going to need some fingers to control the wings. So let's call this wing finger A. And this is going to have a left and a right because this actually mirrors. And let's do 4 of these. So we'll create that. And we'll place these up here. So this one would be probably aligned perfectly to this. And then we'll just have this coming down the wing like so. Okay, so basically I'm just going to go through and I'm going to lay out all of these joints. We'll do one more, wing finger B, for example. Snap that into place because I want to be, I want to be able to control the membrane, the wing membrane. So basically I'm just laying these joints out. If we go to wireframe, you can see on our 2D card, we have each of these joints coming in. And so I'm going to add one for the head. I'm going to add one for each of the legs. I'm going to create some leg joints and everything like that. Now, once again, for timing, we are going to do this a little bit cooking show style, and I'm going to show you what the completed layout looks like. All right, so this is my completed layout. This has all of the controls with it, as well as all the joints for the leg, the spine, and the head. And then all we do is, the way this particular tool works is I can just hide those. I believe I can just build this. Okay, so we now have our character rig, and this is fully animatable and all of our joints move. You can see we have our FK legs, we have our IK legs. We can pick our wings and animate them and so on. And so we just take that and we import our model, for example. Open that. And then what we'll do is we pick our model file and we pick our spine, just like you do with any other skinning. And skin, bind skin, bind skin. And the general gist is when you do that, things should move. I forgot. I have to select hierarchy. I usually have that unchecked. Skin, bind skin, not selected joints, joint hierarchy, apply. Okay, so now do we move? Yeah, so now our wings move. Okay, so now we have a two-dimensional concept art projected onto a two-dimensional but 3D plane that is now has joints in it and is skinned, and we can animate it. Okay, so what we're going to do is, once again, we have our completed rig, which I've saved out here. This is our game rig. Now this one's specifically set up to be able to export and import into Unreal. And to show you what I mean by that, it basically just means in the outliner it has a separate root, right? That way I can export just the joints and the bones. But overall, I just cleaned up some of the colors here, and I can take our character's head and I can move it around, I can pose it, etc. Now, I'm still going to be constrained into a stylistic 2D approach to my animation, but it's going to work and be a lot more repeatable than some of the workflows that I found when I was trying out like Adobe Animate and a few other things. So speaking of animation and our progress on this whole 2.5D journey, what's next? We need to set up our animation scenes. And there's some important parts to that. And one of the important pieces is we need to make sure we lock off our camera. So let's open a template and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Do I have one? I may have put this in Flybat C. It's our idle. Here we go. Here's our template anim. Okay. All this scene is a camera, basically. There's nothing else in here but this register camera, and you could call it cam main, cam register. The point is, I called it register because it's more like the old 2D animation process where we used to register our drawings using the three holes at the bottom. So this is my register cam. Once I lock this down, I do not move this. So let's create a reference to our character, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here is our game rig. I'm going to open that. And this character, you'll notice, is sitting here in the middle of the frame. This is important because when I click render, I do League Moments mashup. I didn't actually see you hop in. Welcome to the stream. I do have a game, and actually we're going to be pulling this straight into the game project specifically. Now, if you're talking about like here, the platformer that we're building, we have a platformer and a 3D, kind of more of a 3D thing as well. Or are you talking at work during the day job? Because I am also working on a game at the day job too. Now, the point here of this camera registration is you need to think about what animations this character is going to do. A great example is, you can see here, I have a lot of space around this. Why is that? The reason I have a lot of space around that is because when I take this wing and I flap it down, if I mirror this pose, hold on a second. When I mirror this to the other side, you'll notice that it takes up this whole frame. Okay? So what ends up happening is, when you render this now, I need to make sure that I don't have clipping. I need to make sure that as I render these images, everything is included for all the potential animations I'm going to do. That includes the jump, that includes the wing flap, everything. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to render this out to create our 2D sprites. So that's the first half of the 2.5D for creating and facilitating the 2.5D workflow. So let's take a look at, so that's why this camera is set up. Now, it's okay if I don't realize exactly what it needs to be at first. So League Moments mashup, yes I do. I started off on League of Legends, and then and now I work in R&D, working on a bunch of kind of like the next wave of games. This is at Riot, actually. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at a scene that we've animated that has all of this stuff kind of done, so you can see what we're doing. All right, and I'll give you a great example. We'll take a look at two scenes. Let's look at the idle first, which is not going to be super exciting, but if we press play in here, you can see our character's just kind of moving and breathing, right? Nothing too wild. And then now let's take a look. And if you render this, you get an image that fits on screen. The whole thing fits here. And if you look, when you set up your render settings, you can set to make sure you generate your alphas as well. And then if we look at our jump, so we did a quick jump for this guy. Okay. And now I'm actually going to have to, okay, so this you can't even see in this camera view. So let's just go out to our front view so we can see this proper. Okay, so we did a jump. All right, now this is where I want to talk a little bit more about the export process to 2D, the first part of our 2.5D, and we have to go fast because we got a lot to cover. So basically I've created this animation, and I've done this in a way that makes sense to me as the animator. I want to move it through space and time. I want that to work. It was much easier for me to look at this like this and figure out what looked good. Okay? Now, I cannot export this like this. Why is that? Because at the top of the jump, if I go back to my register camera, which is under orthographic, that's the other thing, this is an orthographic camera. If I render this, there's two problems with this. One, if I render this, you'll see the wings are cut off. If I use this image as a sprite, my wings are cut off. Here's the other problem. The character is moving away from the origin, which is defeating the purpose of the whole registered camera, a lock-off camera. So what we actually want is we want this character to jump in place so that the actual jump that happens in game is driven by the Unreal Engine. I'm going to show you how to do that here in a second. But first, it's important that you understand this export process. So what I'm going to do is all of the animation for this character is done on all the movement in scene I purposely put on the layout node. The reason I did that is because I can come in here and I can mute the animation now. So let's take this and let's mute all of this. Now when I play, watch what happens. Our character does all the same animation, but he does it in place. He doesn't move, okay? Which means that what's going to happen is in engine, the capsule, as the capsule moves, that's what's going to give it the displacement, okay? So we need to export this as basically cards. So to export this, what I do is I go to my render settings, and this is where this is cool because it facilitates a couple different workflows. I'm going to name this flybat b jump. In this case, I'm exporting them as TIFFs. Not super ideal, but it's fine. And then what we're going to do is, this is also very cool about the way this renderer works. I can do unpre-multiplied alpha or pre-multiplied alpha. Number of frame padding 2, and then I just give it my start and end. In this case, I go 1 to 39. And then, yep, 1K is fine. So if I decide my sprites are too big, I can cut back here and render 512s. Super easy, okay? Go ahead and click close, and then I'll just go ahead and click render under our render menu, and I'm going to batch render this. Okay, so when we batch render this, Maya kicks this off, Arnold starts and works its magic, and then over here in our flybat Maya folder images, you will see we have all of our jump images rendered. Okay. Just once. So you can see this is what, one of our frames looks like. All right, let's pull this into Unreal. Okay, cool. So I am going to close this down. Actually, before we do that, let's do one more thing. Okay, that is going to be, we've exported the 2D side of things. Just because I know we're going to switch to Unreal so we don't have to come back, I'm also going to export the 3D side. What the heck does that even mean? What that means is I'm going to go back to my rig. Okay, so here's my game rig. And just like when you're working with any other 3D character, I'm going to pick, I'm going to pick all my meshes. I'm going to pick the root node, and I'm going to do an FBX export, selection, FBX file from the list, and do all this stuff. FBX, export it, so I get an exported FBX file. Now that's not the way I personally work. I have a bunch of tools that help me with this. So the way this is set up, this is an export tool that I have. It takes my character, it understands the concept of a character within my personal pipeline. I click export, but under the hood, all this is doing is it's picking the meshes, picking the root joint, exporting it as an FBX file. All right, once we've done that, we're going to do the exact same thing for the animation. So let's go back to our jump animation so that we have our stuff prepped and ready. When I refresh this UI, you'll notice that it's a little bit different. In here, I can export my frame start and end range, and I can name my animation, etc. And this does the exact same thing as basically picking the root joints and exporting the stuff to FBX. Great. So let's just call ourselves done with Maya. So let's go to Unreal now and finish this stuff off. Okay, so here we are in Unreal. And what we need to do is we need to do a couple bits of work. So first, let's go to this folder. I'm going to pull all this stuff into a new character called flybat because we only have about 10 minutes to go, and we have a ways to go. So let's just go ahead and flybat. I'm going to create a new folder called texture, and then in here, I'm just going to show you going through the process. I'm going to import from our Maya images folder. I'm going to import all of this. Idles, jumps, everything, all in one fell swoop. Also, let's make sure Perforce is connected so it doesn't freak out. Okay, cool. So these are all of our images. If I right click, I'm just going to choose sprite actions, and sure, let's apply the paper 2D settings. Oh, it only did one. Of course it only did one. Let's pick them all and apply our paper 2D settings. Sprite actions, apply the paper 2D. Cool. Now let's take our idle and let's create sprites for that. So for every single part of our idle, we have a 39 frame idle, just like we would as if we hand painted each of these sprites. We're going to create the sprites. And I'm actually going to close Maya in the background for now, just to save resources for the stream. So now we have our sprites. And then with our sprites, let's take all of these, show you the final bit here. Let's right click and create a flipbook. Cool. Now let's take a look at our flipbook. Okay, there we go. We have an idle flipbook. This is a concept image that we converted to a 3D flat plane that we then rendered out, and you can see we've generated our series of sprites and a flipbook, and we can do the exact same thing for the jump. We basically pick all of our jumps, we create the sprites, and we do that. Now I am going to show you in here the jump so you can see it. The jump currently is exactly what we talked about before. It all happens in place. And the reason it happens in place is because the actual engine is going to handle doing the jumping. Now, I'm trying to think if there's anything special else that you should know about that part of it. There isn't, okay? But let me show you what that looks like when you connect it all up. If we take and we look at our animation tree for this character, inside of our animation state machine, basically we have our idle, we have our jumps, our falling, our landing, and then we're going to go back to our idle. This character is never going to run, and all we're doing in here is inside our jump, we're playing our flybat B jump. Okay, so what happens is if we create this character in engine, what you get is a character that can jump. And this one in particular is set to, oh dude, you almost killed me. This one in particular is set to just jump back and forth and shoot up a whole bunch of projectiles that obviously kill me. The cool thing about this is that, as I mentioned, you can now see that the jump in place is playing nicely with the movement of the capsule. And this allows me to prove out some of my theories and things like that around how to potentially animate 2D characters. Now, this is truly a 2D sprite. If we zoom in on it, where'd it go? This guy. Oh, that guy's just jumping around doing his own thing. Where are we? So you can see from here, this is just our 2D sprite as we move around it. Okay? So let's escape out of that and take a look at that. So that gets us to the first half. The first half of our 2.5D. So let's finish it off to bring the 3D in as well. I have a bunch of IT Angel as far as the art goes. I have done part of the art. A lot of the original concepts come from. I have a lot of friends, and I did a bunch of work in some of the previous projects I've worked on for my own stuff, where I have a bunch of concept art lying around, some stuff that I want to do. These characters are currently actually being modeled into true 3D characters right now, because I'm trying out another workflow for that as well, where we're going to take an actual 3D model and convert it to 2D as well, which will be a whole other thing. But I want to be able to move forward on the game and the systems and everything like that in its place. So while I'm waiting for all of the 3D come back, it takes a while. It takes a while to model all these things in 3D. While I'm waiting for all that to come back, I can still move forward with gameplay and everything like that. Yes, absolutely, League moments. We're going to launch a game ourselves. We're going to start with this platformer. We're going to put it out just for fun as part of the community and just, the learning aspects of it and stuff like that. And then we'll see where we go from there. So we have our 2D sprites being used on a 2D sprite character. Now let's take a look at bringing in our 3D character. So what we've done is, if we go into our mesh folder and we just import, this is awesome. If we just go back to Maya and our export, our FBX folder, all I'm going to do is I'm going to import the skeletal mesh first. Okay, so let's open that. Standard FBX import settings. I don't need animations. We'll keep all the convert frames, etc. There should be no skeleton because this is going to be its own brand new skeleton. So let's import that. All right, when we do that, we now have all of the standard things that you have with a normal 3D character. We have our skeletal mesh, and as you can see, it's actually a lit skeletal mesh, and it has 4 material slots for all of our materials. So all we have to do is grab some materials that we made using the exact same pieces and play a little bit of guess and check. So there's our body, here's our head, and then we have each of our legs. See if we can get the legs. That's the right leg. So we need the right leg then. We're missing. I don't have a material for the right leg, so let's just dump this on there and call it good enough. Okay, so we have our character as a 3D mesh, which means we can use all of the normal bone blending and everything you do that you see in third-person shooter, first-person shooter, everything else. All the workflows for this character are going to be exactly the same. So if we simply take this mesh character and we drop it in our scene, just to show you how this might work. Let's put this character over here. In its simplest form, what we need is we need to import one more thing. Let's import an animation. And in this case, we're going to use the jump. Okay, and we need to make sure we pick the right skeleton. Fly. It should be this one. And we do want to import the exported time, etc. Cool. So we've imported our animation. We should be able to preview this. If we double click, you'll notice that this is actually our animation playing. Now I exported it in space because I don't have the capsule set up for the 3D character yet. But the overall point is this is a 3D character that's actually now animating. It's cool because we even get shadow projections and all those kinds of things. And then what I can do in our level, just to, as a sanity check, or just to show you, rather than using an animation blueprint, we can use an asset. There's only one. And now when we play, if we look, our character is jumping. So we have in the same scene, we have a 2D sprite version of our character. That's this guy over here. And we have a 3D version of our character over here, all exported from the exact same source art files, with just simply changing the export process and workflow a little bit. I am able to facilitate both workflows. Okay, and I just thought that this was potentially really cool and very powerful and really easy to do. I mean, we literally set up a character in an hour in both 2D and 3D. Now, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because, let's go ahead and wrap this up with some questions and explain why I'm going through all this effort. So why am I doing this? I am doing all this because there are some things that I've noticed as I've been working with 2D sprites, that there's some limitations, specifically on, you don't have bone blending. There's no way for me to blend from jump to idle and so on. So depending on what level of polish I want in some of those animations, feelings, because this project, this platformer is about the art. It's about taking you to a world to explore and experiencing that world. Gameplay is a huge part of that, but a lot of it is just the feeling of being in that world. And depending on where I can get to with the sprites versus the 3D, I want to have the flexibility of doing both. This workflow allows me to do both and lose almost no ground either way. It's actually a whole lot easier for me to make mistakes and regenerate sprites if I need to. And it also provides the flexibility of the skeleton workout as well. I'm not positive that you would use all of this, but in here is a cool process and explanation of how to generate sprite images without hand drawing them. You can use, Maya and render them out, etc., as well as just a general skeletal export process for a more 2D stylized character. So that kind of wraps up everything I had for this 2.5D character workflow. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up today's live tutorial? I'm going to be posting the schedule for our next live tutorials for next week. Hopefully we should be back to our regularly scheduled times. I should get those up by Friday or Saturday in general. We're going to probably be taking a look at materials and maybe some debugging techniques to help you all level up some of your blueprinting. It turns out, I didn't realize it, that there's a lot of things about debugging blueprints and your own blueprints that I didn't realize there are people who don't know about some of the stepping through stuff. IT Angel, I've not gone over your other videos yet, but how do you take a picture image and cut it to the animator? So, okay, so there's a couple of answers to this, but usually it's all about the background, right? So if you just take a picture of yourself, you can pull that into Photoshop and mask it out. But if it's a moving picture, then you want to use more of a green screen type process where you make sure that your background is, if you're wearing a blue shirt, sure, you can use green screen. And basically then you can use 2D software to cut out the image, or like compositing software to cut out all the images for you, so you don't have to do all of that work by hand. And I believe actually Blender has a full kind of pipeline in it, but I just use Photoshop. And especially with the new Photoshop, the new, not the masking tool, selection tool, there's a new selection tool where when you click, you can literally change the mode, and it does an amazing job of finding the silhouette and the outline of your character. And you can use the masking tool to paint it and get your hairs and all kinds of stuff. So I like Photoshop. Photoshop is, I think Photoshop runs, I think you get all of Adobe tools now for like 20 or 30 bucks a month, I think it is. All right, y'all. As always, thanks for hopping in. Thanks for checking out the video. If you're watching it after the fact, don't forget we have the Discord community. We'll usually hang out there and just do a bunch of work. Everybody's kind of working on their own projects, asking questions back and forth and stuff. That's fun. Also, the Patreon stuff is there. For a lot of the tutorials and things like that, I'll upload the files after the fact. And if you like these videos, if you like what we're trying to do here, help us out, spread the word. You know how this works. We're trying to build up a community of people who are all just excited about doing development, blueprinting, Unreal Engine, building virtual environments, game experiences, all kinds of things. I definitely have got to run, Lucian. Throw your question on Discord and I'll try to get to it, but I actually have to get to the day job today. So, everybody, I hope, what is today? Today is Wednesday? Yeah, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your week, and I will catch you on the next live tutorial. Thanks for checking out Ask a Dev. Have a great weekend, everybody. Later.